A vast nationwide network of subterranean fortresses.
It's really huge, actually. You can get lost.
Designed to stop a German invasion.
The soldiers were shooting blind.
I'm proud because they fight like lions.
A 2,000-year-old city without water.
Water is crucial for the lives of the people.
What subterranean secrets are being revealed?
It was totally crazy, finding something totally unexpected.
And deep beneath a mountain, a new discovery after 150 years.
Wow, this is like a geologist's toy shop, and I've got all the toys.
Beneath our feet lie extraordinary spaces, caves, and tunnels.
The span and the size is just crazy.
They've been designed and built by us.
This is the only one with a castle.
As well as formed by nature. But how were they created and adapted? By who and why?
You've got to face your fears.
Throughout history, subterranean life has captured our imagination.
I feel so privileged.
We're going further and deeper to unearth the mysteries, the stories, and the secrets of underground worlds. France, a country shattered by many of World War I's bloodiest battles. When the war ended, the French became obsessed with being prepared for future conflicts. During the 1920s and 30s, as Germany rearmed and World War II was looming, the French government decided to build the largest network of subterranean fortresses the world had ever seen.
The Hackenberg is called the Monster. It's the biggest fort. It's huge.
What 1930s cutting-edge military technology lay in wait for any potential enemy invaders?
You could move the turret 360 degrees and stop it at the exact location they needed to.
And what is still hidden from view to this day?
This part is secret.
In 1929, André Maginot, a World War I veteran who was now the French Minister for War, convinced the French government to build a defensive line of 142 subterranean forts, 352 gun encasements, 78 shelters, 17 observatories, and 5,000 fortified concrete bunkers along its entire eastern border. Its construction began in 1930 and was largely completed by 1939 at a cost of 3 billion francs. This state-of-the-art, massive military marvel was designed to deter and slow down any direct German invasion across its border with France. It became known as the Maginot Line. The largest subterranean fortress along France's 450-kilometer border with Germany is at its most northerly point. It's called Hackenberg Fort, or Ouvrage Hackenberg. Hackenberg is 20 kilometers from the French-German border at the highest point in the region. Elise David is an expert on Hackenberg's history.
The Hackenberg is called the Monster of the Maginot Line because it's the biggest fort of all the line. It was one of the first to be built, so they put a lot of effort and money into it. It's more than 80 years old and still here. It's huge.
1,800 people took 6 years to build the Hackenberg Fort between 1929 and 1935. This vast 10-kilometer complex of tunnels, up to 90 meters below ground, was built to house 42 officers and 1,040 soldiers. There are two main entrances, one for ammunition, the other for soldiers. It's so large that it has its own train network and stations.
The trains were used to carry all the tools, the munitions, water, food, all the supplies for the soldiers, and they used these trains only inside. It works with electricity. You have the trolley here with the catenary on the roof, and we still use it.
Around 300 meters from the ammunition entrance to Hackenberg is the main ammunition store, known as M1. Around 400 tons of ammunition was kept here before being distributed to the 17 combat blocks further inside the underground fortress.
So now you are inside the gallery of the ammunition store M1. It was used by the soldiers to stock all the ammunitions in the different cells. M1 was the biggest inside this fort and even inside the whole Maginot line. It's really huge, actually. You can almost get lost.
The M1 ammunition store was built in a U-shape. On one side, empty trains would wait to be loaded by soldiers, and on the other side, fully loaded trains with ammunition would be wheeled out of the exit. But moving ammunition inside M1 had to be done by hand.
The train couldn't work with electricity inside, which was too dangerous in case of any spark. The soldiers had to push the wagons. They were helped by a winch. They unrolled the cables around here to pull the wagons inside, and after to unload the wagons inside all the cells in here.
Once inside the store, soldiers used a specially designed ammunition transportation system.
This is the monorail system. It's one of the rolling bridge, as we call it in French.
Overhead monorail tracks would allow soldiers to lift heavy ammunition from the storage area onto the wagons.
Still works. But yes, it works. These are the originals, the same change, the same monorail system. We haven't changed it at all, so yeah, the soldiers touched this and handled these chains 70 years ago and more.
M1 was built with safety in mind.
Here you have 3 cells only for the gunpowder. They had fire alarms inside here. They had big tanks filled with water. So when the alarm rang, the tanks they were used directly. It was an automatic system to shower all the cells, to flood this area in case of fire.
The entrance and exit to M1 were also built with safety in mind. They're curved, so if anything exploded inside the ammunition store, the blast would be directed out of Hackenberg rather than in towards the rest of the complex. When the ammunition left the M1 store, it was destined for one of the 17 combat blocks deep inside the 10-kilometer fortress. Elise is on her way to Combat Block 9 in the western wing, 1 kilometer from the M1 store.
We are still 30 meters underground at the bottom of the Block 9, and the firing rooms are just near the surface, so they needed to get everything up. The elevators were used only for the ammunition cages. That's why you have a part of the monorail system that goes directly inside. The soldiers were not allowed to take the elevator. They had to climb the stairs every time. Same for the offices. There are 143 steps to climb.
At the top of the tower is one of Hackenberg's big surprises, which is an ingenious feat of engineering. A large counterweight system operates a 163-ton retractable artillery tower. It houses 2 135mm howitzer cannons. Should the Germans attack, 2 soldiers from below could fire 6 rounds each per minute at a range of 6 kilometers.
The soldiers were shooting blind. They were waiting for the orders from the command post downstairs. And thanks to the 2 observatory blocks, they had all their coordinates. You could move the turret to 360 degrees and stop it at the exact location they needed to. They had to believe and trust the coordinates. They were here just to fire. The soldiers didn't have any protection for their ears. After a while, they used what they had, papers, tissues, anything. And even for the 2 soldiers that were inside the turret, it's like inside a bell. So they had the vibration, the sound, the smoke when they fired. So it would have been really difficult.
Hackenberg was the first and the largest of France's subterranean fortifications. Its construction informed how many other underground forts were to be built and lived in. 95 kilometers to Hackenberg's east is France's second most powerful fort on the Maginot Line, Simserhof. Simserhof is located 4 kilometers west of Derbyshire in the northeast of France, facing the German border. It's built 30 meters below the surface, and like Hackenberg, has separate ammunition and personnel entrances. It has its own power utility plant and main ammunition store, with a capacity of 33,600 artillery shells that served 8 combat blocks. Simserhof took 9 years to build, completed in 1939. On the 21st of August that year, the entire Maginot Line, including Simserhof Fort, was brought to a state of readiness for war. 876 soldiers were now hidden underground. Betty Bruhl is an expert on Simserhof and how military personnel lived in this subterranean fortress while waiting for the Germans to invade.
This part is secret. Visitors could not see this part. Here you feel really how it was, because it looked like yesterday. Soldier bedroom. There was between 24 and 36 soldiers in a bedroom, one bed for 3 persons, but they didn't sleep together, they working in shift, like in a submarine, so it was hot bank. You never could be alone, so you could not relax. If soldiers from outside have to come inside, there was no enough beds. They could make hammock that they could sleep. This was an officer bedroom. And you see, there is decoration, painting on the wall. It's beautiful.
If soldiers were asleep in the dark depths of Simserhof and the Germans attacked, they could be certain of finding their way to their combat blocks quickly and easily.
You see, above doors are S, exit, sortie. There is a glowing arrow showing the way of man entrance. So if enemy coming and switch out the light, you just have to follow the glowing arrows and you could find the exit.
In comparison to the horrific trenches of World War I, living conditions for soldiers in forts like Simserhof were significantly better. Here, they even had a lounge bar, which was designed to be a refuge for soldiers.
They could pick up mail, they could listening music, play cards, drink something, smoke, and on the wall you have Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. This was painted by Romain Simon, soldier in the Simserhof, and he decided to paint Snow White because the cartoon from Walt Disney coming in 1937 in France, first one in color, so very, very famous. This is the only room they could relax and feel like at home.
Soldiers living in Simserhof spent much of their time waiting for German invasion. They brought many elements of their lives above ground into the subterranean fortress.
This is the chapel. Each Sunday they had holy ceremony. In this part of France, religion was very important for the men. On Christmas, the whole crew, 876 persons, coming here, they had a special lunch with foie gras, with champagne, with cigars, and they sing "Stille Nacht." No, it was in German, because in this era we're speaking dialect.
Finally, on the 10th of May 1940, the Germans launched their blitzkrieg against the West. Simserhof and the Maginot Line initially remained calm, but deadly exchanges were inevitable. From the 21st of June 1940, Simserhof fired 13,500 shells in just 4 days as it defended itself and surrounding fortifications.
You could feel how hard the Simserhof was fighting.
Despite the strength and elaborate design of the Maginot Line fortifications, they weren't able to stop the German troops entering France, who invaded via Belgium in the north. However, the immense firepower and impenetrable design of these major subterranean fortresses meant the Germans didn't capture a single one of them.
I'm proud because they fight like lions. It's our story, you feel something. Not hear and see, but feel.
The French surrendered to Germany on June the 25th, 1940. It wasn't until the 30th of June, and only when directly ordered by Commander-in-Chief of the French forces, that Simserhof finally relinquished control to the Germans. The underground fortresses that continue to line these borders are a constant reminder of the threat France faced during World War II. Beneath the rolling hills of Derbyshire in England, after 150 years of searching, a surprise discovery.
The saw started to plunge into the wall.
Wow, that is quite outstanding. A wonderful piece of Blue John, quite exceptional.
How has this subterranean space produced a precious mineral found nowhere else in the world?
We believe that Treecliff Cavern is formed in a rather special way.
So precious that it's owned and cherished by British royalty and American presidents. Derbyshire, Britain. The small town of Castleton sits in the northern part of the county. Vicky Turner's family have been at the heart of Blue John mining and production here since her father, Peter Harrison, took over Treecliff Cavern in 1945.
Growing up as a little kid, well, I was brought up here. I used to come up on the winch as a baby in a carry cot, so I've grown up here all my life. I can't remember not knowing about Blue John, not knowing about Treecliff, because it is my life. I grew up here and I'm third generation Treecliff Cavern. So from 1945, the family have been here consistently, and we still are.
Vicky's son John is also part of the family business.
I've been working with Blue John professionally for about 6 years, but as a hobby, probably for the best part of 20 years. But it's amazing cutting the stone open, seeing it go from raw to the finished product as in jewellery or as an ornament.
So what I'm looking for now is I'm looking to keep the stone right up against the silver, creating a nice dome. And that looks like we've got no flaws, we've got a flawless patterned stone.
One of my favourite bits is cutting the stone open. Doesn't matter if there's clay covered on the outside, once you've cut the stone open it's clean, you can see all the patterns, all the colours just revealed to you. It's amazing.
Blue John was formed around 300 million years ago, when this landscape was buried 3 kilometers beneath the Earth's surface. Liquid minerals, at a heat of about 120 degrees centigrade, were deposited and crystallized as veins in the cavities within Carboniferous limestone. Dr. Noel Worley is a geologist and expert on Blue John.
Blue John is calcium fluoride, which is a mineral called fluorite.
Despite much investigation, geologists remain uncertain of the origin of Blue John's color. One hypothesis suggests that atoms in the fluorite molecules may somehow have been disturbed to create this unique color.
We believe that the blue colour here has been produced as a consequence of the irradiation of the layers of fluorite within the cavities.
The origin of Blue John's name is also shrouded in mystery. Some believe it comes from when it was exported to France in the 18th century. The colors of the mineral, blue and yellow, when said in French, being bleu, jaune.
Wow! Well, this is like a geologist's toy shop, and I've got all the toys. A wonderful piece of Blue John. Beautiful. That is quite outstanding. I can see that this material is going to be quite exceptional.
It is believed that Blue John was first discovered by accident in the mid-18th century. Gary Ridley is Treecliffe's cavern manager and is a Blue John miner.
The original miners that discovered these caves were actually lead miners looking for lead, and when they broke through into these caves they found very little lead at all. Nowadays you can see just these empty passageways. Back then they would have been absolutely full of Blue John, and I would imagine for the first few years they were hardly doing any mining, they'd just be picking the stuff off the floor and around them. So much Blue John there would have been in these caves.
In 300 years of mining on Treecliff Hill, about 2,000 tons of Blue John has been extracted from 15 so-called veins. They all vary in colour and form.
Most of the Blue John veins are very different from each other, and 9 times out of 10 when you see a piece of Blue John jewellery or an ornament, you can tell exactly which vein it's come from just by looking at it.
Treecliff Caverns and its Blue John deposits only run about 150 metres into the limestone rock. Mining here has never been on a large scale requiring explosives. Each piece of Blue John has carefully been extracted in the same way for centuries.
The mining methods would have been called plug and feather, and until quite recently we used to still use the plug and feather method. You would have had 2 miners, and one would have had a drill bit, quite a long drill steel, and he would have held it on his shoulder. And the other miner would stand behind and he'd whack the end of the steel, and every time he'd whacked it, the guy in front would twist the steel. And this must have taken absolutely hours to drill these holes.
The busiest period of Blue John mining was in the 18th century, when about 20 tons per year was extracted.
Once the Blue John industry had taken off, of course everybody wanted to get in on the act, especially if you're a local. So you could walk the hills and you might find some of this vein coming out on the surface in little outcrops, so you could dig some of the Blue John out from there. Probably at its height there would have been as many as 20 little operations going on this one little hillside.
Today, there are only 2 working Blue John mines. When Treecliff was taken over by the Harrison family in 1945, the previous tenant, John Royce, who was unwell at the time, showed Peter Harrison around the Witch's Cave and suggested he had discovered an unmined part of the upper Treecliff blue vein.
He was told by John Royce that there was a vein of stone that he wanted to dig out.
But John Royce died before Peter found out any more.
Grandad was never told whether it was a vein still in the wall or loose rock ready to be carried out.
Despite huge efforts, Peter couldn't find the mysterious Blue John deposit. It became known as the Lost Vein. But then, 68 years later, in 2013, Gary Ridley was showing Peter's grandson John how to search for new veins using hand tools on the soft clay, when they stumbled across something exciting.
About half an hour into digging, I discovered this vein in the wall, which was telltale signs of hidden vein. There was carpet, sticks, stones to hide it.
They rediscovered the lost Blue John deposit.
He hid it, and he hid it a little bit too well, and yeah, we had about 4 or 5 tons of stone out of it.
2 years later, in 2015, Gary was testing out a new way of mining, using a stone chainsaw in an area of the cavern he'd never dug before.
At first, I was drilling into limestone. It was quite hard to drill, and the water that was coming back from the chain was very white, so I knew we were in limestone. And then after a few minutes, the colour of the water started to change, and the saw started to plunge quite quickly into the wall. So I knew we were in Blue John.
Unlike the discovery of the lost vein, Gary had found an entirely new variety of Blue John, and the first for over 150 years.
I then thought, well, how much is this? So we brought a jet wash in and we started cleaning the walls down, and then we could see that the vein itself was travelling into the rock and it was twisting up around the corner. So there's a fair bit to go at, and it should keep us going for quite a few years. And once I got a piece outside and cleaned it up, we realised what we got was a completely new vein, and Vicky, the owner, decided to name it after myself. Having a vein named after myself, it feels a bit weird at times, but keeps your memory going long after you've gone, I suppose, so having that knowledge is quite satisfying.
Gary's meeting geologist Noel Worley to show him an example of his Ridley vein.
Beautiful piece of Ridley vein, with a particularly characteristic yellowy orange colour alternating with the deep blue and purple.
You can see there's a lot more yellow in this vein than the other veins as well. And we've got these two close bands about halfway down.
It's the first time it's seen the light of day in probably 300 million years.
The Ridley vein is the 15th to have been discovered, and only the second to have been named after a person. Blue John and Treecliff Cavern aren't just of interest to geologists. Professor John Gunn from Birmingham University is a speleologist, a cave scientist. He's fascinated by how these caves were formed.
We believe that Treecliff Cavern is formed in a rather special way, not by water descending, but by water actually coming up. And we call this hypogenic speleogenesis. So the water rising up is forming the cave. The very earliest phases of developing a cave in this area occurred over 300 million years ago. Then we had a phase when the rising fluids were mineralizing fluids, and they brought in the fluorite minerals, one of which is Blue John.
John is here to explore a recently discovered series of caves named the Hidden Depths. He wants to see what traces of Blue John there might be in this newly found space. He's agreed to film his journey down through the rock with a small camera.
There was always a thrill in going into somewhere that very few people have been in, some newly discovered cave. From a scientific point of view, I was particularly interested. There is no question about it, those chambers down there are hypogenic. You can see that there's been rising water in there. They're also really interesting because they've got the Blue John mineralization. So this is some of the lowest elevation Blue John mineralization we've got in the area. Great. So it's absolutely pristine down there, absolutely beautiful. You know, one of the really amazing things about a place like this is how few people have been down there. And we reckon that less than 20 people have ever been down in that part of the cave. More people have been to the moon.
Less than 1 ton of Blue John is mined from Treecliff Cavern every year, and there's no need or intention to prospect for Blue John within the Hidden Depths for the time being. The demand for Blue John as an ornamental stone diminished throughout the 20th century, but with the turn of the 21st century and the new veins being found, it's experiencing something of a renaissance.
It's a great vein to work with, and the pattern really stands out no matter whatever you put it in.
There are very few areas in the British Isles that you can see geology so clearly displayed. This is a superb example.
People like John Turner are working with the mineral anew. And large old vases have realized enormous prices at auction houses. Blue John is rare enough that it will never support a major industry, but its role within the decorative arts continues to evolve.
I'm 30 now, and I've been running around here for the last 11 years like a child, loving it, love the place.
Istanbul, Turkey. A transcontinental city straddling the Bosporus Strait where Europe and Asia meet. For more than 2 millennia, its location has been strategically important. But without one thing, it couldn't survive.
Water is the key strategic point in the surviving of the city and crucial for the lives of the people, and there is no freshwater sources.
What extraordinary feats of underground engineering meant this city could thrive for nearly 2,000 years.
I'm looking at it like, wow, how the hell did they think about this? We're sitting on top of history.
And what subterranean secrets are still being uncovered today?
It was totally crazy finding something totally unexpected.
In the year 395 AD, Istanbul, then known as Constantinople, was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. But this was a city with no fresh water source. With people flocking here from all over Europe and Asia, an ingenious solution was needed. In the 6th century AD, during the reign of Emperor Justinian, water was transported 19 kilometers by a series of aqueducts from the Belgrade forest and stored in underground cisterns in the city center. Over the centuries, as the city is being redeveloped, Istanbul's hidden past is being revealed one cistern at a time. When redeveloping an old site for his latest shop in 2004, Cenk Tutan of a local carpet store got more than he bargained for.
There were 3 houses, double floors, above. The excavator hit, and that was one of the doors that led us under those houses. Thanks to the excavator, that's how the whole thing started.
Cenk's builders had uncovered a subterranean secret.
This whole place was covered up with dirt and water and a bit of everything. It was totally crazy finding something totally unexpected.
What they'd found was a cistern about 1,700 years old. Cenk's carpet shop is on the site of a very important ancient palace.
This was the water for the upper class. They were using it to shower, they were using it to cook their meal, they were using it to drink it.
This cistern and its 18 marble columns would have provided water to the great palace of Constantinople during the reign of Emperor Justinian.
Can you imagine the water that was preserved in here was actually drank by the royal families?
He has invited Dr. Kerem Altug to his carpet shop's restored subterranean secret to see if he can reveal anything more about it. Dr. Kerem is an archaeologist and historian and has been researching Istanbul's cisterns for more than 20 years.
This is the original staircase. You can still see the steps.
That's the one.
Yeah, so that was the entrance.
What's the stone made out of?
This is a brick-built structure.
Okay,
So
brick.
brick and mortar.
Okay.
You can see a thick layer of plaster. This is the waterproof hydraulic plaster, original Byzantine plaster. When the plaster ends, this indicates the maximum storage level for the cistern.
Okay.
These are monolithic marble columns, and these are reinforcement built during the later period, in the Ottoman era.
Okay, so this is not the actual original one.
No.
That's the original one.
That's the original, exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
fantastic. I find this cistern beautiful. To me, it's an art. To me, it's history. I'm looking at it like, wow, how the hell did they think about this? And what made them do this? But whoever did it, I'm happy, because this is history.
Beneath the city of Istanbul, there are reportedly a staggering 200 ancient subterranean cisterns. Professor Feridun Özgürmez is an archaeologist and Byzantine expert. He was charged with restoring the oldest cistern ever discovered. It's called Theodosius cistern.
In 2009, I was appointed for the restoration consultant of the substructure. It's very important for us because this is one of the few Byzantine substructures very well preserved to our days.
Theodosius cistern was discovered under a 20th century mansion and a municipal building that was constructed in the 1950s. It is 45 meters by 25 in size and has 32 marble columns, 9 meters in height. So, how were these robust subterranean structures built?
Before the construction, engineers dug the ground and all the height and the width and the length of the structure fixed by the engineers, and then they put these column shafts.
The walls of cisterns were typically made from brick, 4 meters thick. Builders then needed to guarantee they were watertight.
They plastered the walls. Those plaster is waterproof. And if you look at the corner there, you can see the corner is rounded. If the corners of cisterns were not like this, the water itself could go out of the cistern easily through the joints of the walls. When we excavate a big, empty space like this, if we see the corners rounded, then we assume that this must have been a cistern, water cistern once used in antiquity.
The 8-year renovation of Theodosius has been true to its original design.
The plaster on the walls, the restoration plaster from 2016, it has the same ingredients in it. Lime and ground bricks, that's it. The lime gets solid in 15 days, but it can stand 5,000 years maybe. If you use cement, it gets hard 3 hours, but that destroys the fabric of the wall because it has salt in it. That one has no salt.
Across the ceiling are holes leading to the surface above, meaning water was available to everyone.
Those holes are used for taking water by buckets from the cistern. Some of the cisterns have fountains outside the building, and this was the main source of water for the public use.
The people of Constantinople had perfected the design and construction of cisterns. There are remarkable similarities between all of them.
Those are original steps from the 5th century, belong to that cistern, hidden underneath this modern plaster. All of the cisterns in Istanbul from the Byzantine period have steps on one of the walls of them. Those steps may have been used for cleaning purpose, but we don't know for sure their original function.
What is clear from the design and construction of these 1,700-year-old structures is that they were built to last, even through natural disasters.
Although many earthquakes hit this city and a lot of buildings were damaged badly, some of the ancient buildings, including this one, remain to our days almost without any damage. So this tells us that good engineering, good calculation, good workmanship, thanks to all those three things, beautiful ancient buildings remain to our days without any damage.
The most famous cistern known to have survived beneath Istanbul is known as Basilica cistern.
The
The Basilica cistern is the biggest of the cisterns in the city, and it's an enormous engineering achievement. It was built in the 6th century to supply water for the Great Palace and the nearby buildings during the reign of Justinian. It is a very sophisticated system of water supply. It's definitely one of the most important monuments of Byzantine Constantinople.
This vast cavern, measuring 138 meters by 65 meters, could be filled with 80,000 cubic meters of water. Its ceiling is supported by 336 marble columns, each measuring 9 meters high. Many were recycled.
Here we can see one of the reused architectural elements here, a stylized wood trunk manufactured in the 4th century.
The decoration on this column resembles others found elsewhere in the city. Ancient texts suggest that the tier-like decoration pays tribute to the hundreds of slaves who died during the construction of the Basilica cistern. In the northwest corner, there are 2 striking columns standing on the heads of Medusa.
That's probably from the 4th century, Roman. There's a second one you can see, which is upside down.
It's not known where these came from, but the significance of their use and orientation is clear. In a newly Christianized city, characters like these that were associated with previous belief systems would have been scrapped.
These are also reused in the structure.
A local tradition also suggests that the faces were positioned sideways and upside down to eliminate the petrifying power of Medusa's stare.
Basilica cistern is one of a kind and biggest here in this land. There's nowhere we can have a bigger example of a reservoir and structure like this.
Cisterns aren't needed for water supply today, but experts and passionate locals are determined to make sure they're preserved for generations to come.
This had to be preserved and had to be refurbished. We're trying to provide people the information and the history that they're actually stepping on.
Cenk and his colleagues have taken extraordinary steps to ensure that Nakas cistern is preserved.
In order to protect and preserve the whole beautiful history under this building, we have a huge steel construction that carries the weight of the main building, and this way doesn't give any pressure to the cistern itself. The weight is pushed out.
Many of Istanbul's subterranean cisterns have been transformed, giving them relevance to life in the 21st century.
Most of these things are privately owned. One of them is a restaurant or a beautiful hotel. Some of them are museums. Some, like this, is exhibition hall.
We've had painters from around the world coming. We had musicians.
There are a lot of things to be discovered in Istanbul. Most of these buildings in Istanbul have mysteries.
We're sitting on top of history. You know, if we drilled at the moment on these roads over here, we'd probably find more cisterns.
There is no other Roman city to compare with this size and number of the water storage units as Constantinople.